This meeting to order. Madam Clerk, have we met all the noticing requirements for this meeting? And please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Here. Ms. Crum-Miller is absent. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Liverman?
Here.
Ms. Butler is absent. Mr. Simon?
Here.
And Mayor Lemper.
Here. And just for the record, there was an earlier version of the agenda that had a closed session at 6:30. We did not have that, and we are just starting the meeting right now at 7 p.m. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will start tonight with announcements. Ms. Howard, any announcements? Mr. Miller, any announcements?
No announcements.
Mr. Liverman?
Announcements. No.
Mr. Simon? Okay, I just have a couple announcements. The first is that we have cooling stations open for the rest of this week, both in this building and in Monument Hall. And also, there's going to be a forum on this Wednesday evening, starting at 7 p.m. at John Witherspoon Middle School. And it's a program being put on jointly by the municipality with the cooperation of the police department, two congregations, the Jewish Center of Princeton and also Stonehill Church. And then the schools are a partner too in letting us use the space. So everybody is welcome. Forum's going to be about coming together after some of the tragedies we've been reading about from around the country with shootings, both of police officers and of African Americans. And it'll be a chance to hear from a couple people in depth from the community and then also have a conversation. So I welcome everybody to that. And are there any staff announcements? No? Okay. Then we will move on to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on something that's not already on the agenda? No? Okay, then we'll move on to approval of the minutes. First is revised from March 28th, 2016. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Liverman. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Simon. Any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes passed. Next are the minutes from April 11th, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes passed. And last is minutes from April 25th, 2016. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Simon.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Miller. I just want to call everyone's attention to the minutes that include Mr. Simon's changes. Those are on by our spots up here. So are there any further comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes of April 25th passed as well. Next, we move on to reports, and our first report that also has a resolution attached to it, and I would like to invite up Bob Gregory, our Director of Emergency Management, to talk to us about the situation with the sprinkler heads at Washington Oaks.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, so I put together a little PowerPoint to first explain how the system works at Washington Oaks, the type of system it is, and then we'll go into testing requirements and then the next steps after that. So these are specifically residential sprinkler systems, and the goal of those systems are to reduce injuries and deaths in residential fires. So that's their main purpose. Whereas other systems do property protection, things like that in certain situations. These are specifically life safety. The benefits, of course, these systems help confine fires until the fire department gets there. And by confining the fire, they basically open up egress paths. So if you're in a bedroom, the kitchen, a fire occurs, it keeps the fire contained, keeps the smoke to a minimum, and it keeps the smoke cool to allow escape from the structure. And these are specifically quick response sprinkler systems. And so they're referred to as quick response or fast response, meaning that they activate quicker than the average system. And I'll explain that a little bit further. So the picture you see up here, these are specifically residential sprinkler systems. They're called multi-purpose systems. So they're actually tied into the residential water system. So the same water that feeds the hot water heater, the bathrooms, the kitchen, the sprinkler systems run off of that. So each of the systems out at Washington Oaks, each of the condos, townhouses, have their own system supplied by their own water, municipal water supply. There's two types of sprinkler heads, standard and quick response or fast response. So the standard sprinkler heads, they're in all the mechanical rooms. And in a townhouse or condo, the mechanical room is the space where your hot water heater and those things are located. So they have a standard head in that area. Within the living space are the quick or fast response sprinkler heads that you see on to my right, and they're throughout the living space. So there's two types, and the standard response sprinkler head is basically kind of a bigger, bulkier sprinkler head, and it activates the same as the quick response. The difference is the quick response will activate about 20 degrees less. So if there's a fire and the fire hits, the quick response will go off at like 120 degrees versus the standard, which it might need to get up to like 150 degrees to set that off. So that's why they're quick or fast response, because they act quickly, they keep the water up at the ceiling level to cool the smoke and the fire to make that access possible to exit the structure. The biggest difference, again, is that the quick response is quick. It just gets the job done and helps for egress. So that's pretty much what the systems are and the components of the systems at Washington Oaks. Now, where we get into the testing requirements, which is what raised some issues out there, there was some misunderstanding. Some individuals thought that after the sprinkler heads were in place for 20 years, they had to automatically be replaced, which is not the case. There was also a thought that you only had to do this if you wanted to gather statistical analysis, and that's not true either. The New Jersey State Fire Code references the NFPA standard, and it's NFPA 25 of the 2002 edition for testing requirements. So in that standard, it says that the testing for sprinklers manufactured using fast response elements that have been in service for 20 years, which they've been 20 plus years at Washington Oaks, they shall be tested. And then every 10 years going forward, they have to be retested. And what's that mean? So when they have to be tested, there's a percentage of the sprinkler heads, which is really determined by the contractor. All the contractors are New Jersey certified. So, for example, if there's 4 sprinkler heads in a small unit, they may take 1 and send it out for testing. If that sprinkler head passes, then they certify the system, and the other sprinkler heads don't have to be tested, and they'll take another one in another 10-year interval. So that's how they do it. And they have a formula for, I think the max amount of heads in the bigger units is 15. So they have a formula they use to determine how many from each space they need to test. Now, the other issues out there is that there's a recall on certain sprinkler heads that goes back almost 20 years. So if any of those sprinkler heads are recalled sprinkler heads, they will need to be replaced. You can't test them, you just have to replace them. The other two reasons you'd have to replace them is if they were damaged or painted. Then they have to be replaced. Then there's no testing the system. So our next steps, I should hear from the contractor this week on cost. He also did some evaluation on, I believe it's the 3 units that the town owns. We were going to go in, take the heads out, determine if they were recalled, if any were damaged or painted, and if not, send some out for testing. So we're waiting for numbers on that, and then we'll move forward once we get a cost and a determination on recall. I'll be meeting hopefully with the residents next week. They're actually having a meeting tonight, and I'm hoping that they can give me a date where I'll meet with them. We are required by state statute to give a notice to each resident to get their system tested or replace the sprinkler heads. So I will review all that with them. We'll go over a timeline and then develop a plan to get this accomplished.
Okay, and we also have a resolution in front of us, too, that would, yeah, you have some questions? All right, Mr. Miller?
Bob, are these in all of the buildings in Washington Oaks or only in the multifamily units?
I believe, well, I have a count of 109. So I believe there's 60 in the, it's the low-income housing, I believe, or about 60 units.
Yeah, there's 60 affordable housing units.
Right, affordable housing, and then the balance are market units, they call them.
So not all of the market units are outfitted with sprinklers?
No, I don't believe so. I think at the time these were built, it's what the construction code called for, and then it possibly changed. I didn't get that far to look into why some of them may not have them.
When was Washington Oaks built? Before Griggs Farm, I assume?
Yeah, I could find that out. I don't know the exact date.
Before PCV?
Oh, no. I think Griggs Farm was built between 25 and 20 years.
Right.
PCV was up before then, I think 77, 76.
I guess what I'm getting at, is this a problem that is unique to Washington Oaks, or are we going to face this in other?
No, that's a good question. This is unique to Washington Oaks because the system there, they're individual units. That's why the homeowners are responsible. So, for example, Merwick, Stanworth, those units that are built out there, they have a common riser room, so the fire department water connection comes in and it goes to different risers, and that feeds the apartment. So the association is actually responsible for all the fire alarm and sprinkler maintenance and testing. But because these are individual units, it's the homeowner's responsibility. So that's the big difference. And I've researched and looked with the inspectors, and we don't seem to have this anywhere else. All other places that are sprinklered have riser rooms with common areas that the associations are responsible for.
And I just want to say that the reason why we're bringing this up tonight is that there is a time of the essence kind of situation here where there's only a limited amount of time we're given before violations can be given to these residents. If we haven't put a plan in place, we don't think that we're going to have every single member, every single family, every single home of the 60 apply, but we want to have it available in case they do need funding to have this done, because it's, if not, they'll be in violation, and then when you're in violation, then you have fines that you have to relate to also. So we don't want to go in that direction.
And this is more of a process question, I'm sure, either for Bob or for Lance. So has the Affordable Housing Board been informed of this?
Yes, we've been informed, and we voted to move it forward to the council. And the Affordable Housing attorney, Mr. Schmier, agreed wholeheartedly that this was definitely the direction to go.
Are there any other comments or questions? We do have a resolution in front of us that would authorize the use of funds from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the 60 units to be used for this. So is there a motion to approve Resolution 16-232, Emergency Sprinkler Head Repairs and Test, Washington Oaks?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Simon. Any discussion on the resolution? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you, and just,
Thank
somebody
you.
should just keep us up to date
Okay.
as the tests happen. Thank you. Next report, we have Chief Setter with us here tonight to give us a update on public safety in between the regular monthly police reports.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Heather, did you want to give an intro as
Well, I think,
public
thank you,
safety?
Mayor, I'm glad, thank you. Yes, we met 2 weeks ago, and I think you weren't here, but you were very ably represented by Officer Toole, and we had agreed, given all the news that had happened recently, and at that point, the shootings of the police officers in Dallas had happened. It was obviously before Baton Rouge, but we decided to have an additional meeting of the Public Safety Committee in the interim before the next one could meet. We had heard from constituents, obviously very interested in what we've been doing to strengthen relations, and obviously this has been of something of great interest to council and to the police department. So we had a meeting of the Public Safety Committee and really brainstormed about ways to continue to focus on what I think Chief Sutter calls positive encounters that the police can have with the community, and how we can strengthen even more the kind of outreach that we've been doing for years. But how do we, obviously given what's happening with the national dialogue, what can we do here to even improve relations? So Chief Sutter had a couple ideas that we wanted to make sure he came and reported back. And so this is a little unusual. There's not an actual police report. This is an out-of-sync meeting that you're coming to, but we thought, given how important these issues are, it would be terrific for Chief Sutter to be able to come talk about, because also hopefully people will notice the difference. So part of the plan is to be talking about it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Thank you. As Councilwoman Howard put it in perfect context, and since that meeting and prior to that meeting, I've had the opportunity for a lot of kind of personal reflection and a lot of meetings with all the different stakeholders in this crisis that we find ourselves in. And I thought what I would do is present to you in the context of 3 broad areas to kind of give you a picture of where I feel we are locally. And the first piece I was going to share was quotes from 3 conversations that I've had that moved me to the point that I thought I should share them with you publicly. They really capture the national feeling on a local level. And then the second piece, I wanted to share kind of 4 principles that I identified and kind of took from different places and applied locally that we can put into action here to address I'll refer to as the crisis. And then lastly, I wanted to briefly explain to you some of the initiatives and different types of policing strategies we can employ to pursue those 4 strategies. So I'm just going to read you 3 quotes that really, as I said, moved me and kind of really just put this whole conversation in a local context. I start the first one. I didn't grow up seeing the police as a legitimate ally in my community, but rather a group to be feared, and I prefer to keep my distance from you. The second, Chief, I don't even have the words anymore. I'm crying inside, but I will press on because that's what we do. And the third, Dad, why do so many people want to kill the police? And that pretty much, 3 different conversations with 3 different members of our local communities really grasps the fact that it is affecting us here too. These are national events that maybe didn't occur here in Princeton, but we're all suffering in one way or another, and it's bringing other conversations to light that we all have to have. So I start with quickly with the 4 principles that are no new inventions, but things I think we have to concentrate on. First, I took from the DOJ report on Ferguson. Police must engage in proactive efforts to understand the communities they serve. If we don't know what the community wants from us or expects from us, we don't know how to serve them. And it's not the police department really dictating to the community what they need. It's the exact opposite. Legitimacy is only possible through sustained community engagement. And I've been professing this within the department for quite some time. Community policing is not a program or a fad or again, a program to be done by a segment of the police department. It should be the fabric of the philosophy of the police department, which I feel that it is. And we have to continue to push towards that. This is an interesting one that kind of really got me. True change in the area of perceived or real social injustice will take time and commitment from not just the police, but the communities they serve. And that really hits the nail on the head, because a lot of the things we're dealing with are real and a lot of perceptions. Perceptions of the police, perceptions of the community, perceptions from both sides. And I guess perceptions can be changed or informed, and I think the way for that to happen is through communication, things like the forum that we're going to have on Wednesday. And then finally, no one group owns the problem, and no one group will solve the problem. All the effort that I could put into this or mandate the police department to put into it will not solve the problems. Hopefully to move it very far locally, because I think we're a small enough, tight enough community where we can affect some change, but there's got to be collaboration. So finally, how do we do this? How do we accomplish these things locally? We've heard from our community through our strategic plan, through our focus groups, through several years of conversations of the things that are important, and community policing has always been one of those things. And we've had to have these conversations and develop plans and programs. I keep using the word programs because a lot of things we do are programs, develop that, fostering community engagement. I kind of see it right now addressing the problem in a much more basic and grassroots type of approach. I see us increasing our positive, I used this term before, positive footprint in the community, almost on an individual basis. I can appear before groups and speak to groups and profess all these things and tell people what we're doing, and I found that people aren't going to believe it until they experience it for themselves. Some people especially that don't have a trust of the police or perceive us to be unjust or the system to be unjust. So, well, how do we do this? As Councilwoman Howard said, we increase our positive interactions with people. So everybody knows that one of the primary functions of the police department, besides public safety, and to that end of public safety, is enforcement, which always is and always will be. We consider them in a way to be, they're maybe not always positive for people, but they serve a positive purpose. Equally as important to those encounters as they are to public safety are, on the other side, the proactive, positive encounters. So, as a child, I recall this being, my father being stopped by a police officer and me being in the back seat, and I remember as a kid, wow, this is scary. I also remember my house being burglarized and an officer coming to the house and sitting 2 hours doing geometry homework with me. Those are the two things that resonate with me, if you gave me my two experiences as a child. So from that perspective, there was an enforcement contact, there was a positive contact. Both of them resonate with me. I understood the need for both of them, but there's got to be a balance. There's got to be fabric within the department of increasing those positive contacts. And we've done it already we've been pushing towards this for quite some time, and that would be through, I've presented it to you before, our new patrol plan, foot plan in the Central Business District, where we have officers that are assigned sectors in the Central Business District, and they go and meet and have been doing this, business owners, residents that live in the Central Business District, and they introduce themselves, and that's kind of their community police officer. They have a contact, other than me, that if you go to me, it has to go all the way down, and there's a little delay. They have people right now that they can call. They have their cards. They know when they work, and say, hey, Officer Smith, I had a theft in my store. Can you come give me take a report and give me ideas on how to stop theft? And they have a contact, and they know them by name. And to me, that's the basis of this positive interaction. It's got to start at that level. There's another part to this that we're starting to realize is there's positive contacts going on constantly in this community, all the time, constantly. We just don't know about them. Nobody gives them much attention. The officers go and do these as routine. They just do it in the course of their patrol. Nobody knows about it. And I think it would help our community, help the perception of the police if we highlight those things more and let people know, look, we're doing these things, take advantage of these things we have to offer. We're doing a lot of good. And that's what I've been professing to the department. It's really that simple, is that let's continue on the focus that we have, stay committed to our core values, our mission, stay committed to the strategic plan, and while you're doing that, start increasing those positive contacts as well. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. They're doing them in the course of their business as it is, and we just need to spread that word and also engage people that are fearful to engage us, as this person is. I prefer to keep my distance. That's not acceptable to me. That's not why we got into this business. It's just the opposite. We want people to feel comfortable around us. And we can change it to a point here, and maybe if we continue to build on these things on a grander level nationally, we'll have the conversations, and there'll be transformations that take place, going on a larger scale. But I definitely think we can influence things here through this type of approach.
So I think that's great, and I want to get feedback from other members here who weren't part of that discussion, Mayor and Patrick. Just to continue that thought, Nick, you come before us once a month and we go over a lot of numbers, and you've talked about data-driven policing, right? But you've talked about, you mentioned the Ferguson report, and when you read the Ferguson report, it talks about how data there was bad, right? It permeated, the focus on enforcement and tickets and funding municipal operations through those ways permeated the department, and is what drove a lot of the bad action in Ferguson. Now, you've done a nice job with your report of summarizing snooze activities and trying to capture all this, but how can we make sure we're capturing all of this? And if more officers are going to be doing more positive things, is that going to show up? Are we going to see that? And how will it show up?
Yes, that's a great question, and we've talked about this internally already, and I've presented this to our officers. I think the first thing to recognize in the Ferguson report, when you really delve into it, is that based on the DOJ study, there was a real hostility in that community and friction between the police department and the community, and enforcement was driven by revenue. That is definitely not the case here. Enforcement in this community is part of the community policing philosophy, because we're being asked, and really people plead with me, to enforce speeding and the motor vehicle laws. We get complaints. It's one of the major complaints we get. And to that end, quality of life is affected. So we have to continue keeping our streets safe and enforcing. But it's not being driven by revenue. It's being driven by a need for public safety. To that same end, we can track statistically to a pretty good level of how much time officers are spending by simply when officers are out. See, our officers do these things in the course of their patrol, and they'll stop the car and do something and help someone, and it never gets tracked. It's just as if they stop to fuel their car. It's not tracked. We need to track them. We need to track that so that you and the public and I can see exactly how much time is going into that.
Well, and I mean, and to be honest, what you track is what you're setting the message that that's what you value,
Yes,
right? And so
correct.
if you're not, so just as an example, last week I saw two officers at 9 o'clock on Nassau Street and stopped to chat with them, and they were talking with a young boy on a bike. And they had, he didn't have shoes on, he didn't have a helmet on, and it was dark. And they were talking to him about, where's home? Do you need us to take you home? And they had called the young boy's family to let him know. And while we were chatting, the father came and said, "Oh, I'm so glad. We weren't sure where he was." This whole interaction had happened very informally. No paperwork, pens ever came out. And it turned out it was a family had moved here recently from a culture where I think bike culture is very different. And the father was very appreciative. The kid was, palling around with the officers. It was a very positive encounter, even though they had stopped this kid to say, who was biking on Nassau Street without a helmet in violation of presumably several rules. But the result was the family now understands the rules, the kid was safe, and it was a positive encounter. Is that going to show up anywhere? I observed it just by chance, but I wondered.
I would tell you normally that wouldn't. And what we've instructed our officers to do now is in our computer-aided dispatch system, our records maintenance system, they can document that encounter, the time that was spent on it. So we'll be able to see exactly, okay, we're doing this much time here, this much time report writing, and this much time engaging in these types of contacts. And there'll be a short description of the type of contact they engaged in, and it'll be something that we can now watch how it tracks and how it, is involved with everything else we do.
I have a question. So I know you get together, I don't know if it's monthly, with the other chiefs from around the county, and I think one of the things we recognize with a lot of what we do is that the border of Princeton is, people don't necessarily, they think about police as being the same. And so do you have this conversation with the other chiefs, and is this something that you're thinking about regionally as well?
Yeah, it definitely comes up a lot, and I think the thing that we realize is that all of our populations, our constituents, if you will, our service areas are different and require different things of us, and that's definitely, while we're similar to many surrounding towns, there are things that are different about our policing, and our policing needs to be somewhat different, but we do talk about this, and I really do think that it's a philosophy that is really used in a lot of departments, and a lot of officers get into the business for this reason. It's just not talked about a whole lot, and it's not highlighted a whole lot. So it's kind of something that just goes unsaid. And I think we need to do a better job nationally, the departments that are doing this stuff and good things. And it's not just about social media. We rely on social media heavily, but there's a lot of people that aren't reached with social media, and the way to really do it is on the street, with the officers on the street. So to answer your question, we do talk about it, and I do think it's something that everybody's thinking about.
Right. And I think another initiative that you had that was really successful, that maybe combined the two, was the speeding enforcement that was announced ahead of time, because I feel like part of the community policing is one of, I can't remember which number it was, but it was listening to what the community wanted and then delivering that. And I think what we hear from almost every neighborhood across the whole town is that people are speeding on their streets. And to make it clear, we're not enforcing it to pad the budget, is that we're doing it to keep the streets safe. We're going to tell you when it's not a trap, it's slow down. And I feel like I know you did that on social media, a lot of and I think there was a big positive response to that. So I would encourage you to continue with that program, because I think it combined a lot of what you're talking about.
I agree, and we just have talked about internally, I hope that you'll notice it as well, we're trying to aggressively pursue our presence on social media with all these things, and really just push as much as we can. It's very time consuming, and we have really one officer doing it, but we got to really pursue that communication, like the things, they tend to come in waves, and we go on to other things, and these things get left behind as a program or an initiative. I really want to make them part of the fabric, that they just are part of what we do every day. So to your point, it's right on.
Are there any other questions or comments from the chief? Yep. Ms. Howard?
So just to that point, I think soon the officers also, during this serendipitous encounter last week, mentioned that they're going to be starting giving out coupons to local restaurants when they see kids wearing helmets, right? I mean, to
Yes.
continue this theme about promoting safety and good encounters, right? Is that,
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
And, well, that was a initiative that was brought to us, actually, Ms. Stockton, I think, recommended that to us, that other communities were doing it, and we said, wow, what a great idea, and right away partnered with some local establishments, and it's like a friendly traffic stop. You know, a young man or lady is riding their bike, bang all the laws on the bicycle with their helmet, and an officer pulls up next to them, stops them, and they get a coupon for free ice cream or a slice of pizza. And our local establishments love it. I think it's something that people continue to sign up for.
It's a pretty good deal.
generates,
You have to read 25 hours to get the library's free ice cream, so that's a pretty good deal.
Is there an age limit on that?
and it also generates
Right, is there an age limit?
good
Can you tell us in
patronage
advance
for-
where they're going to be?
Yeah, I'm sorry?
Can you tell us in advance where they're going to be?
Yes.
So we can all appear?
Yes, we will.
Yeah. One final thing I knew, to beg your indulgence, since both you are here and Bob Gregory are here, Councilman Miller and I today received an email from someone in the New Jersey Air Force Reserve. I don't know if you've seen the email yet, applauding Jorge Narvaez, who's one of your officers, and he's a member of the Safe Neighborhoods Unit. I don't know if everybody else on council knows. There's this amazing story that I hope we can highlight maybe at one of our next meetings about the work he's doing. He's an immigrant from Nicaragua, to take our decommissioned fire truck and to ship it via the Air Force, where he is a reserve officer, and donating it to Nicaragua. And there was a story that they shared with us in the Air Force Reserve newspaper about Jorge and the work he's doing.
And here's a typical
This was a surplus,
example of what I was just talking about. Just does it because it was the right thing for him to do, and never mentioned it. Just did it on his own time.
I emailed Chief, did you know about this?
And,
No.
and all of a sudden, you find out about it, and he just thought that was a nice thing to do, and it was, and never bothered. These things go on, and we need to highlight them more, so that everybody kind of sees what type of people we have working here and how much they care.
So Bob, I think it's being shipped in August, is according to the article, so maybe we can do something to thank Officer Narvaez then when it happens. Thank you.
Great, all right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we will continue with reports with Ms. Howard.
Thank you, Mayor. The Animal Control Advisory Committee met today to review our 2016 deer management program, which was effective. We were looking at the numbers, and we saw one thing that was very good to see was there had been a significant drop in car-related accidents caused by deer, so that's been very important, one important measure of the effectiveness of the management program. We also discussed planning for the 2017 program, and so we hope to be coming back to council before the end of the summer, perhaps as early as before the end of the summer, with resolutions to set up the next year's deer management program and contracts with with White Buffalo and also a recreational hunting group. So the high level is that this year's program was effective, and the planning is underway for next year's, and working with outside counsel on the appropriate resolutions. We'll be coming back to council to ask to move forward on that this year. A separate animal-related issue that might be of interest to folks is that over the last month or so, there's been about an average of once a day bear sighting in Princeton. So, and just wanted to remind people that we have protocols in place if there is a bear sighting, and you can call the main police line, or you can call Access Princeton, and we have protocols for handling those. None of these have required DEP intervention because the bear in question, and it's not clear whether it's the same bear or more than one, but there haven't been any, there wasn't any menacing threat from the bear, but it is the season when we're hearing, and I think Chief Sutter, you guys are probably on the front line of that, and Nate Barson coordinates closely with the police department. So if people have any questions or concerns, also on the main website, there is a fact sheet for people about how to make sure they're, reminding people not to feed bears. They are not cuddly animals, and also how to make sure your garbage is being cared for carefully. So that's it on the animal control front. From the Board of Health perspective, do you want to add something else, Tim? Oh, yes. Well, we also did hear was a busy week for animals. We did hear concern about raccoons in several parts of the town. In particular, somebody noted a raccoon that ran across Tiger Park, right in downtown. And so there was a thought that perhaps, and I want to thank Councilwoman Butler for bringing this to my attention. Nate, our animal control officer, thought that perhaps that could be related to some improper garbage collection downtown, and so health inspectors are going out to try and check in that area, because that obviously was pretty surprising to see a raccoon right in Tiger Park. And also, Lance, I think you were on this email too, that there were people in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood concerned about...
Yes, there's been sightings of raccoons on Green Street and so forth. We had one of our rental units about 4 years ago that I manage on Green Street. We actually caught, I would say, over 4 raccoons in the attic, and we had them removed. I think they have to be 13 miles away, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 13 miles before they know how to come back to where you are. So a lot of people, if they catch a raccoon and let them in the woods near their home, it's only a matter of time before they come back.
Right.
So it's a certain mileage that you have to take the raccoon.
And obviously, if they're carrying rabies, then they're a significant threat to the public health. So Nate Barson, our animal control officer, was going to go out in the neighborhood and look for, he thought perhaps there might be some nuisance, there might be a place, he was going to check and see if there are places where that might be attracting them to that neighborhood from which the complaints had come. So if people have complaints, we have a terrific animal control officer. Make sure to call them in. Just a few more from the Board of Health perspective. At the Board of Health's meeting last week, they introduced an ordinance to license e-cigarette retailers in town. I had mentioned that this was on the horizon, so that was the first reading, and they hope in September to adopt that ordinance, which we would be the 12th municipality in the state to license retailers. We license cigarette sellers, but not e-cigarettes, something new that has come up since the ordinance was created. And finally, Human Services has put out a call. It's the school supply and backpack drive. Oh, Lance, you got 2 weeks. It's due August 12th, and we have significant need in the community. Last year, about 100 children, K through 6th grade, received school supplies, and so if you would like to donate, there's information on the website. Donations are due by August 12th to the Human Services Department. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, any reports?
Just a quick report on the Emerald Ash Borer. We have 2 student volunteers who are working with our arborist and with the members of the Shade Tree Commission to enter data into our tree database and to do field work to identify where the ash trees are on municipal property and do a quick assessment of the condition of the trees. We have the prospect of additional volunteers in the form of students from Princeton University who are here during the summer, and at this point, the Shade Tree Commission and the arborist are working to set up a program to bring additional volunteers on board, because the 2 that we have will be leaving us probably in about 3 or 4 weeks to go back to school.
Thank you. Mr. Woodman, any reports?
No. Are you going to mention the Youth Advisory Commission meeting in September?
You can.
Oh, well, we'll be meeting, the Youth Advisory Commission will be meeting in September, beginning of September, I believe it's around the first week, and for our first meeting to put things together for this coming year. And other than that, it was just the affordable housing information that Bob Gregory mentioned, and that's about it for reports.
Mr. Simon?
Just a few quick reports. First, starting with Citizens Finance. I just want to thank the members of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee who worked on the newsletter that went out with the tax bills. Hoping that was informative for residents. Specifically want to thank Scott Sillers, Maureen Kearney, Adrian Kripke, and a volunteer who's not actually on the CFAC, but who helps us out with this, Roger Shatskin. And hopefully I didn't miss anybody. Also on the staff, I want to thank Sandy Webb for her assistance with this. Also, just to let people know, CFAC is following up on one of the finance recommendations, which was to talk to individual departments and managers and just sort through some of the budget issues. So we met at our last CFAC meeting. We met with Ben Stentz from REC, and also David Goldfarb presented on the SOC, and both of those were very informative, and in fact, we do actually have a fair amount of discussion about the rec finances here in council, but maybe it might be a good idea to have a work session where we talk about the SOC and the approach to maintaining our sewers, and basically the proactive maintenance saves the town significant money because it reduces the flow of rainwater into the sewers, which reduces the billing back to the town from the regional sewer authority. And the flip side of that is we know it's not perfect, so that there are still known places in the system where there's significant leaks that can be tracked during storms, and so there's more that the town could do to move forward to improve that further. But it comes with a cost, so there's a prioritization challenge to it. Also, just to let people know that the tax assessment analysis is ongoing. No report of any kind yet, but hopefully later in the year. From Public Works, a few quick items. The organic recycling pickup for June was 45.5 tons, which is the highest for the program. We currently have 1,118 participants. In addition, the municipality and the schools are studying a possible shared service arrangement for organic waste pickup. This is just in the study phase. It may also include Lawrenceville, but it's preliminary, and so we may have more to report on that later. With respect to landscaper registration, about 40 landscapers have registered, and just sort of a public service request, anybody, any resident who's listening to this or who views this, the tape later, if you could just confirm whether a landscaper is registered, it's important, mostly because then the town can explain the rules and provide the leaf and brush pickup schedule. When the Public Works Committee talks about leaf and brush pickup and violations, what we believe we're seeing is that most of the violations are not residents themselves so much as they're landscapers who may not know the rules. So to the extent that people can proactively ask their landscapers to basically inform them, it is the residents' responsibility, and we'd like to ask people to help us out with that. The Public Works Strategic Plan that we're on schedule for possibly September or October coming to council. It's a little bit of a delayed schedule versus what we had said earlier in the year, but at this point, staff is still working on it. There have been some changes that they have to make, some revisions, and they'll get a draft out to the committee to review in August, and then we'll provide feedback, and then we'll go from there. And then the last thing I wanted to report is really sort of joint between Public Works and PCTV is we're preparing for work on the main meeting room in Monument Hall later in the year. The goal would be to provide a better shared space for the various agencies that are using Monument Hall, and for PCTV in particular. It could function as a second television studio, which would have the basic advantage and need is for a larger space than the studio they have now. They're constrained in terms of some of the things they can film, and they're kicking in significant funding toward the project to make it happen. So that we have had conversations both with the Public Works Committee and with the PCTV board on how to coordinate this, and that we should be seeing that at the staff level, hopefully within 1 to 2 weeks, you should have that coordination. And work will start presumably in the 1 to 2 month time frame.
Thank you. I had a few reports. The first is PSE&G reported, just as we were starting the meeting, that there's about a little over 2,000 customers in Princeton that are without power. Some of us coming to the meeting noticed some of the traffic lights are down, and there's police have people there who are helping to direct traffic. And PSE&G says that they're hoping to have everybody back up by midnight tonight. And it looks like the weather's calmer out there, so hopefully that means that they can stay on schedule. If not, get them done even sooner and everybody back up. There was a community meeting last week with PSE&G on some gas main replacement work that they're doing on Russell Road, Murray Place, TR Place, and Linden Lane. And we had another neighborhood meeting the following week, maybe that was 2 weeks ago, on July 20th. New Jersey American Water had a meeting about their work that's upcoming on Snowden Lane. This Wednesday, the master plan of the planning board is meeting. The master plan committee of the planning board is going to be meeting at 9:30 a.m. to discuss the bike master plan. And I was at a conference last week. There's a group called the Local Leaders Forum. Had a conference in D.C. about economic development that I attended. It was very interesting. I've shared my notes with some of you. I can share it with all of council. I think the good news is that Princeton is very well positioned in terms of a lot of the qualities people were talking about were important to encourage economic development. So having a livable, walkable, sustainable, bikeable city is the kind of place that you want to attract workers, and having high-skilled workers are what companies are looking for. So in a lot of ways, Princeton is very well positioned. There was an interesting session I went to on housing, and some ideas about how to encourage different types of housing that seem to have slipped away in a lot of towns. We still have some of them, things like duplexes, fourplexes, garden apartments, or a way to create some housing that's maybe not as expensive as your typical single-family home, but still fits in with the character of many neighborhoods, especially the ones that are closer into town. So there's some interesting discussions there. And that is it for my reports. Are there any reports from staff? Ms. Stockton, no?
Just one item, Mayor. Just wanted to get guidance from council on an issue. As you know, we are actually leasing 8 Clearview Avenue to a tenant. That lease will come to an end at the end of this month. The tenant in that property is a student. They've requested a 6-month extension to finish out their school year. My recommendation is to do that because we also need some additional time to put together a process and determine what our next steps will be in either renting the property or doing some type of conversion there. So if there's any concerns, please let me know. Otherwise, I would suggest that we just extend it for another 6 months.
Mayor, I would just say that's the right thing to do. And then perhaps, Mark, that will give you time also to explore whether it's a potential affordable unit to work with PCH or...
Okay. Are there any other reports?
Mayor, I just have one. I think if Councilwoman Butler were here, I think she would be reminding us of how important the rec department's work has been, especially with the heat wave and how many people have been using the pool. And she's been updating us by email on some of the numbers, but there's been incredible attendance at the pool, and we really should all give our thanks to the rec department. I know they've been working so hard to keep up with the demand with such attendance. So, Mark, please convey our thank you to the folks we know have been working so hard around the clock.
Also, a thank you to them for the swim and diving meet that they're putting on this week. The teams from Princeton area, and it's quite successful.
Great. All right, thank you. Okay, now we move on to our ordinance introduction for this evening, 2016-34, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning trees and shrubs and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And I definitely want to thank the Shade Tree Commission for all the work they've done on this ordinance. And Lisa, are you going to be walking us through it? or who's going to be?
Yes, I can walk
Okay.
you through it. As you know, this ordinance was originally consolidated in 2014, and as with any new ordinance, it takes time to see its impact and to really get a sense if there's a need for any further tweaks and revisions. And in the last couple of years, the Shade Tree Commission has had some ideas as to some ways of enhancing its effectiveness and just making it a better, more workable ordinance. So a few months ago, the mayor and the Shade Tree Commission came forward to the code subcommittee with some ideas as to how to enhance the current ordinance. And so that's where this ordinance comes from. There are several substantive changes, and one of the major changes, I guess I can start at the beginning, and then we can talk about them, and if you have any questions, let me know as we go along. But the first area of change is in the definition section, and that's section 22-2, and there's several definitions added that weren't originally included in the current ordinance. And they're pretty self-explanatory, and they're based on industry standards and terms that are used in the industry. So some of these changes include addition of the definition and term caliper, deciduous tree, diameter, breast height actually is not really a new definition. It just replaces the current term and definition for diameter shoulder height, because diameter breast height is the more accepted industry term for that phrase. Drip line was added. A definition for the Princeton Shade Tree Trust Reserve was added. This is not a new concept. This has always been part of this ordinance, but this definition is important because it clarifies that the money in the fund it can be used not only for planting, but also maintaining the municipality's trees. Updates were added to the definition for replacement tree to make it clearer and more specific. And there's also a new definition in term, tree protection zone, that's been added. And we can discuss that. That has its impact later in the ordinance. But those are the new definitions, and they don't really change the substance.
Yeah, it's actually not about the definition, but sort of a general question, which may inform me downstream, is what's the overall scope of the ordinance in terms of tree removal permits and replacement requirements? Is it every tree in Princeton? Is it constrained?
No, that is still the same basic standards apply. So a main portion of this ordinance has to do with removal of trees on private property, and the standards are exactly the same as to what you can and can't do on private property. And the actual, bear with me for 1 second, the actual ordinance here doesn't include the every single section of the existing ordinance because it's kind of voluminous, and so we didn't include the whole thing. But
right, well, that's also why I wasn't able to wade through the entire thing.
I'm
So
sorry.
that's why I'm
No, I
asking
can
the
tell.
question.
I think I probably have it memorized, but I'm going to pull it up anyway, just so I don't make a mistake. But it's, let's see here, it would be under the old township code. And it's section 22. Okay, the trees on private property requiring a permit that is not being changed by the ordinance. The first category is a tree with a diameter, it'll be diameter breast height of 8 inches or more, an ornamental or evergreen tree with a height of 10 feet or more, a tree with a canopy extending over a public right-of-way, and removal or destroying a specimen or significant tree, and those terms are pre-existing. So the standards are not changing for what you can and can't do on private property. What needs to be included in your application is changing. I'll get to that. We can just move on to that because that's one of the that's probably the most significant change in this ordinance. But, so when a private individual files an application for one of these categories, a major change is the tree replacement plan. So under the current ordinance, if you remove one tree, regardless of its size, the goal is for you to replace that one tree with another tree, a very young tree, because that's the way it's done. It's a tree that would be 2 to 2.5 inches in caliber. So that means you can remove a very mature tree, and then you would only have to replace that tree with one new tree. So there's some inequity in that, and that's been a major concern of the Shade Tree Commission for the last couple of years. So they have proposed and included in this new ordinance a different type of a plan that would take into consideration the size of the tree that's being removed. So if you look on page 6 of the ordinance, there's a tree replacement schedule. And this shows, based on what size of a tree that's being removed, what you'll be required to, what kind of a tree or trees you'll be required to replace. So if you remove a tree with a diameter breast height of 8 inches to just under 17 inches, you'll still only be required to replace with one replacement tree. And that tree would have to be, I believe it's 2 inches in caliber, as opposed to that range that is pre-existent. 2 1/2 inches in caliber, so it can't be any smaller than 2 1/2 inches in caliber. So then if you go on to the next level, a tree with a diameter breast height of 17 to just under 31 inches, you'll be required to plant 2 replacement trees that are no smaller than 2 1/2 inches in caliber. And then it goes up based on the diameter breast height of the tree being removed. And this is supposed to take into consideration the canopy that is being lost, that multiple smaller trees will more quickly be able to bring back what's been lost by the larger trees. And then in the past, or I should say currently, the way that this program has been done is that if the homeowner could elect to pay into the tree fund instead of replacing a tree, and that amount would be based on the value of the tree, and that would be something that the municipal arborist would have to go out and assess on a case-by-case basis, and it's very time-consuming. So one of the other ideas here is to increase the administrative efficiency of the whole program, and that's to create a standard value for each replacement tree. So that's where you see in the schedule on page 6, instead of one replacement tree, there's a value of $400, and it goes up by $400 based on the quantity of trees.
So, Lisa, these aren't for trees that are sick, or these are just for if you want to remove a tree for, let's say, building a house or a home or
Correct.
something of that sort. It's not for a tree that's sick or has to be taken down. It's not for that. Okay.
There are exceptions for
Yes,
those
just so they-
instances, and you would not have to replace
Okay,
those trees.
okay.
You wouldn't have to file a formal application or anything like
Just so
that.
okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah, and actually, the exceptions are in 2212, and it goes into the details about trees that are dead or substantially diseased, and how you're able to remove them. You just have to notify the enforcement officer, but you don't have to file an application or anything like that. Okay, and then another change to this is a 50% requirement for the amount of trees that will actually have to be replaced. So if you remove 10 trees, and you only have to plant 10 trees in their place, then you have to plant at least 5 of those trees, either on your property or on other property, just to ensure that the trees actually get planted, and then that the money's just not put into the trust fund, that there's actual action being taken. In the past, there wasn't such a requirement, so someone could remove trees, pay into the fund, and then no trees would necessarily have to be planted in that same area or within any particular amount of time. So that was another concern of the Shade Tree Commission, to make sure trees get replanted. Now, just backing up, in terms of some of the other changes, there's a recommendation for an increase in the application fee. This, again, is an application to remove trees, one or more trees, on private property. The current amount for the application fee is $25 per application, and this, it could be one tree, it could be 50 trees. It's a per application fee. The recommendation is to raise that fee to $40 because there has been, and there is a steady increase of applications. You can see a few numbers here in the memo that we provided, how in 2015, 458 applications were processed, and as of just May of this year, 121 had already been processed, and that was before the busiest season. So there's an increase in these applications, which is a good thing. It means people are complying with the ordinance, but it also means that more trees are being removed, and also that more applications are being filed, and there's more time being demanded of the municipal arborists and staff. So this money will go towards the administrative fees involved. Another area where the Shade Tree Commission and staff had requested some change is in reference to the time that they would have to review applications for removal. So originally and currently, the arborist has 15 calendar days to review an application for tree removal on private property. And the request is to increase that to 20 business days, because what happens after that time period is that if it's not acted on, it's automatically approved. So this will ensure that staff and the municipal arborist has sufficient time to go out and investigate and look into each of these applications on a case-by-case basis. And again, with the increase in applications, it is a reasonable request because of the additional time involved. Another change to the ordinance, and it's not exactly it's more to codify the current process than to make changes to the current process, is the section on informal resolution procedures. And there are a lot of cases where trees are removed on private property erroneously, and one of the fixes for that is to file a complaint in municipal court. But that is not the route that is in the municipality's best interest initially, or a homeowner's interest. So it's always been a hope that these matters would be resolved informally before the Shade Tree Commission and with the help of the municipal arborist. So under section 22, I have the right number, 16, this section deals with the violations and informal resolution of complaints. And again, there are a number of these types of informal complaints. The changes here for this section are intended to clarify the process, make sure it's clear to everyone involved what is happening and what the rights of the parties are. And again, the goal is to ensure that these matters are resolved before the Shade Tree Commission and the municipal arborist, and that they're amicable, because it is time-consuming and costly to take one of these matters to municipal court. So it's always been the hope to resolve these amicably, and that's the goal of the changes to section 2216. And there's an added provision that would allow the municipality to recoup some of its additional administrative costs involved in resolving these complaints, because there is a lot of additional time involved when the municipal arborist has to go out and investigate a scene where a number of trees have been removed and they're only stumps. It's more time-consuming to investigate that, and there's a lot of staff time. So one of the proposals is for the municipality to be able to recoup some of those administrative hours that are involved.
Before you go on, I did have some questions on this section.
Sure.
So the first is, I read this as constraining the municipality. In other words, the municipality can't go to court unless it first follows this process. Is that the right way to read this?
Yes, that is.
Okay. The second is, in terms of the informal process that we've been following now versus what's outlined here, is the informal process described in the proposed ordinance more restraining or less restraining than the process that's followed now? Does the does the municipality currently have the freedom to basically forgive fees that this sort of takes away, or is it roughly the same?
I think it's roughly the same, because I don't think there's a requirement that these fees are necessarily required to resolve a...
So we shouldn't read it as the hourly wage is a required fee. It's allowed, but it's not a required reading?
It shouldn't be. If it is read that way, then that is a little...
Well, I'm simply asking, I'm not asserting.
No, it is. I think it's a really good point. I think it is, I would say, in the discretion of the municipal, it should be in the discretion of the municipal arborist and the Shade Tree Commission, because if they feel that it's just not warranted in a certain case, that the time wasn't exhaustive and they could waive it in a certain case, that is certainly something that should be part of the process. So that, I'll look through to make sure that...
I'd appreciate just a follow-up on it.
Because I think it's a really good point.
A related question is whether or not that hourly cost should be capped. And I don't know the answer, because I don't know whether a resident can create their own burdensome situation, or whether it's... what I was a little bit worried about is that it could be read by a resident who's not happy with the process as giving sort of a blank check to the municipality. And so how to find the right balance there. And I don't know. You may talk that over with people and say, actually, we don't think that's going to be a problem. It hasn't been up to this point. Or you may talk to people and say, hey, it might be good to put a cap on it. And this is a half-baked idea, not a fully baked one. So please don't take it as anything more than that. I'm simply asking, whether that might be something to consider, a cap on the number of hours.
Yeah, that's not something they discussed, but that's certainly something to consider, because this is not intended to be punitive. It's really just intended to recoup, and you can't always recoup all the costs. It's not feasible,
Sure.
But to recoup some of the costs. So it's definitely something worth considering. And like I said, it's not something that the Shade Tree Commission or the arborist considered when this was being drafted. So it's...
Well, we do have a couple months between now and the public hearing, so if I guess the Shade Tree Commission can just discuss it, and I'm not pushing for one thing or another, I'm just interested to hear the reaction to that, that's all.
Absolutely. I'll look into that, and I'll get some information and their feelings on...
Thank you.
On that.
Are there any other questions, or you're still going through the changes?
I was, but it's a very comprehensive memo, thank you. So
And I'm giving you just as comprehensive an explanation now, but it's, the other major area I think that's worth just addressing again is the tree protection zones that are being essentially referenced to in Chapter 22, as well as the chapter in the municipal code on construction site maintenance. And the goal of a tree protection zone is to essentially protect the trees and the immediate surrounding areas, which is the drip line of the tree, during construction on a given property. And this has been an ongoing issue on a lot of properties where the arborist will go out, the engineer's office will go out, and they don't really have any ordinance to point to say you have to put fencing, you can't put any materials too close to the tree, or you're going to damage the root system, or you're going to do something bad to the tree. So by defining what a tree protection zone is and then adding two different sections, although they're pretty much the same language, almost exactly the same language, to the two chapters, it will further enhance the ability of the arborist and the engineer's office to do their jobs and to ensure that the different tree protection zones on construction sites for each of the protected trees is marked out by fencing, and they're able to enforce those provisions and those zones on a per property basis. And again, it's only for the trees that they can't remove without a permit. So if you have a small, 3-inch caliper tree, that won't trigger the requirement for a tree protection.
I had a question on this section. Does it actually forbid digging in the tree protection zone? Because I didn't see it, but maybe I missed it in my review. And it just seems like if it doesn't, it should.
That's a good question. Let's see. Well, I know it's supposed to be disturbance of the drip line area.
You know, this can be just a follow-up. You don't need to answer it
Yeah,
tonight.
it's another good question, because there may be an instance where they're allowed to do some work. But I would think that they could be allowed to do work in the tree protection zone. So maybe we can make reference to that, you know.
So would that be based on the plan that's filed at the time of construction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But we can also, I can see.
Just, I guess as part of the follow-up.
Yes,
just see whether it
absolutely.
needs to be clarified. And if it doesn't, fine. If it does,
Absolutely. Does anyone have any questions? That's the bulk of the ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Simon?
I'm sorry. I've sort of monopolized the...
No, I was just going to make a motion if we need to introduce it, are we going to have public comment? But you go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the memo, I appreciate it as well, and I echo my colleagues that this is very informative. I did have a question about section 2219H. There's a change in the wording to require disposal of all trees as opposed to diseased trees. And so I guess I have a question.
Right.
I don't know how often this happens in Princeton, but if people have wood-burning stoves or fireplaces, are they required to remove a tree they take down under the permit, or can they stack the wood and use it? It doesn't seem to be the intent, but I wondered if it would be read that way in the future.
That's a good question. The intent,
The intent is to require landscapers to fulfill their obligation to remove whatever trees they
so
take
they don't
down.
leave them on the
Yes.
side of the road during the leaf and brush
Right.
pickup.
Right. So,
It was granted.
I understand that, and I don't know if it needs to be fine-tuned or if it's already perfectly okay the way it is, but that'd just be a question.
That's a good question, too. I'll make a note of that and double-check. So in other words, there may be an instance where they want to actually reuse the tree material.
Yes.
I think if the tree material is not infested, I think that's a double question. I think that's
Right.
Well, it currently requires infested material to be removed, and presumably that's for the safety of neighbors, and
Yeah,
et cetera,
that's what I'm
right?
wondering.
But this is also intended to ensure that all of the trees the assumption is that all trees are not going to be used on property, and therefore they should be properly disposed of, but...
And right, it doesn't push the work onto Public Works
Exactly.
from the...
So there's that little hole.
And I get that, and I agree with that goal. I just want to make sure we don't, if somebody in fact wants to use the wood for whatever
I
purpose.
agree. I'll make sure we discuss that, and I'll get back to you on that as well.
And you already covered at the beginning, the sick and dying trees are already an exception.
That's right.
They're already...
That's right.
Okay. Mr. Miller, did you have any comments?
No, I would just like to recognize the work of both the Shade Tree Commission and the Code Review Committee, who put a lot of effort into this. And I think one of the principal authors of the new ordinance is sitting in the back, Janet Stern. And the Shade Tree Commission worked on this for almost a year. And it was an iterative process between the Shade Tree Commission and the Code Review Committee and our special counsel, who kept us within the legal bounds on this. And there were a couple of times that we pushed the envelope on the legal bounds, but our special counsel pulled us back every time we stepped in the wrong direction. I think what you have before you is a really major effort on the part of a volunteer commission to prepare something that many people in the community asked for, and that is a stronger shade tree ordinance that represents the community in terms of our thinking about the value of shade trees and trees in general to the community, and states so in terms of the provisions of the ordinance. And that's not to say that as we go through this and have experience with it, that we'll find that it may need a further change, but I think that what you have before you now is an effort that took almost a year to produce, and I think, I hope that it will be well received.
I know this was a ton of work, so I don't want to pile on more, but I think it would be really useful to have a one-page just summary of what the new rules are that can be up in the planning, engineering, construction office upstairs, and that we can send out as a press release and give to realtors and give to our landscapers, just so people know what the rules are. So while it's still fresh in your mind, maybe that's something that Shade Tree Commission can help put together. And we still have, this is only the ordinance introduction, so we still have some time before we have the public hearing. I do want to discuss the date of the public hearing before we introduce it, to see if we might be able to push that up a bit. But I think we want to make sure both that we have good laws on the books and that also our residents know what they are so they can follow them.
So I'll move introduction.
Second.
And then I just wanted to discuss the date for the public hearing too. Right now it's down for September 12th because there was concern about I think possible quorum issues, but I think that we have a solid amount of council that's confirmed for August 8th. Is that correct? So if there's no other reason to, August 8th.
Is the next meeting.
August 8th is the next meeting. So unless there was a reason to have the public hearing.
I don't know if it was, I know Bob Huff and Lorraine Kanoka wanted to be here for that meeting. And I don't know if there was an availability issue with them. They may have discussed it at the Public Works Committee meeting.
I know that.
I believe the concern was a council quorum concern that the mayor was discussing.
Well, I actually would be more comfortable with the current date, and let me just tell you why. Because there's, one of the things I've been chewing on, and understanding the exceptions may sort of change my thinking on it, but I'm not quite sure how I think about the change from 1 to 1 to 1 to up to 4 trees, that requirement, especially on smaller lots. On larger lots, it's presumably not much of an issue, but on a small lot that might have 4 or 6 or 8 trees on, say, 0.15 or 0.25 acres, having to multiply that by 2, 3, or 4, depending on the size of the trees, I realize it's voluntary because it's only if a tree is not sick or dying already, but it does seem that that might be imposing a significant constraint on a very small lot, and so I haven't settled on a position on that one way or the other, but it might be something just to be thinking about and have the Shade Tree Commission have a chance to discuss before the public hearing.
Well, I would say that's all the more reason to push it up, because if you want to change it on September 12th, then we'd have to reintroduce it, and we're not going to be, then we'd have to have a second public hearing at a later date. And I mean, if you look around town, every week there are trees coming down. We heard the numbers for the amount of permits, so I wouldn't want to think delay here is, I think, going to have implications to the ecosystem of our community. The other just more, the just sort of scheduling concern I have is that we have very full meetings in September and October and November, and this is something where I want people to have time to discuss it, and I don't want to have to rush through it. And so I know that those August meetings are going to be a little more open. So
Okay,
that would just be a reason to,
In terms of availability, while we were discussing this, I did find an email from INO Director Bob Huff that he is not he's away on August 8th. So, and he is available on the 22nd, but I think we have,
right, we're going to move that to the 15th, right, because we had, right,
pardon, but Councilman Miller, who's our Shade Tree Liaison, is not here on the 15th.
you're not here on the 15th. All right.
I mean,
Does Bob
Do we
Huff
need-
need to be here?
yeah, does he need to be here if he's had input in the process up till now?
I would recommend, can we say that the public hearing is on the 8th? Can we put the public hearing on August 8th, and then if for some reason we want to wait for Bob Huff, we can hear from some of the public, and then we can also extend it?
Or Lorraine, because I think she's going to be able to explain the best, that, answer a lot of your questions.
Right.
So I think she'll be extremely helpful. And I know that she was on the email chain where it was discussed about putting the meeting back into September. So
Okay.
I think it's worth conferring with those two to make sure or at least Lorraine, that she's available.
Okay, but we have to set the date tonight, though, right? So, all right, well, but if we have it on the 8th, does that give us, we can still have the public hearing on the 8th, and then continue the public hearing into September if we feel like we need to hear
Yes.
from
we can
more
do that.
staff, correct? That gives us the most flexibility?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then I would recommend that we have a public hearing on August
It's not a
8th.
land use. It's not a land use, correct? So,
Okay.
I think everybody's here.
Right, okay. So there's been a motion to introduce by Ms. Howard. Is there a second? And seconded by Mr. Miller. And is there any further discussion on council?
Well, we need to formally amend the public hearing date, right? Because she introduced before you requested that.
Okay. So then is there,
I move that we amend to establish the public hearing date for August 8th.
right, okay, is there, okay, so it's motion by Ms. Howard to change the public hearing to August 8th, seconded by Mr. Miller. And then I'd like to, if there's no other further comments or questions from council, I'd like to open it up if there's anybody from the public or Shade Tree Commission who'd want to speak at this point. Okay, all right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on August 8th, 2016.
Was that the vote on the amendment, or?
That was on the amendment.
Right, so then let's vote on the actual ordinance, right?
All right,
I thought it was as amended, it wasn't as amended?
all right, we'll vote to introduce the whole thing as amended then, and that motion's already on the table, so Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and the ordinance public hearing will be on August 8th, 2016. Next, we have resolutions tabled from previous meetings. First is 16-172, resolution authorizing the execution of Amendment Number 1 to the power purchase agreement by and between Princeton, Stony Brook Regional Sewage Authority, and GeoPeak Energy in connection with the Princeton Stony Brook Regional Sewage Authority Solar Initiative. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm in favor, but I actually did have a comment.
Okay.
I simply wanted to thank GeoPeak for working with us to find language on the assignment that was helpful, and also our attorney, Ryan Scarabo, for the same thing. And also simply to point out that one of the amendments increases the amount of power that could be generated, the cap, the top number, and that translates to a potential benefit to the municipality in terms of the rents received.
Great. Thank you.
I would just like to comment on the process that we went through here, because I think that Councilman Simon and I both realized as we got into this that there was an aspect of the contract that gave us some concern, and which really was very different from my experience with government contracting. My experience with government contracting is that the contracting agency retains full control over the choice of subcontractors and over key personnel in the contract. And if the contractor wants to change subcontractors or change key personnel, it requires the approval of the contracting agency, which in this case would be us. I got somewhat of a rude shock when we went through this contract and found that that is not necessarily the case in some municipal contracts. And I think that is something that perhaps our municipal council ought to spend a few minutes examining, because I think that as the contracting agency, we should have control over the contract and the contractor in terms of potentially changing subcontractors, changing key personnel, and even assigning the contract, monetizing the contract and assigning it to another contractor. So I think there is an area here that it took a lot of work on the part of Mr. Simon, particularly to get us to the point where we were satisfied that we were adequately protected in this particular contract. But I think that our municipal attorney ought to spend a few minutes looking into the question of whether or not we ought to have as a standard the fact that in municipal contracts of this sort, where we're actually engaging a contractor to perform a major piece of work, that we are protected completely in the contract.
I agree with Councilman Miller, and I would add one other aspect of it, which really wasn't up for debate by the time we were discussing this, but the contract is actually with an LLC which is set up for the project. But we reviewed the contract in terms of the entity behind the LLC, in terms of their qualifications. I don't know if we lose too much protections in that sort of arrangement, that we should consider changing the way we evaluate bids, so that if you're going to do that, then you have no history for the LLC, and therefore that's part of the evaluation process. And that, I guess that's really a question. I don't know if that's something
To look at
Yes.
the owners, essentially. Well, there is a requirement with bidding that the company who's actually providing the bid provides the names of owners who hold more than, it's either 10 or 20% of the company.
I believe we have all that information. The question is whether or
You
not,
get into
like a special project LLC, whether we might want to consider discouraging that practice, and whether it would be legal to do so in New Jersey. And that's really sort of asking for advice. I don't know what the right thing to do is here, but it makes me a little nervous to think about the fact that we're evaluating one entity, but then they've set up a special purpose LLC to actually run the project.
We don't see that too often with the construction contracts and the smaller contracts that the
I'm
municipality...
sorry, you do or do not?
We don't usually see that. It's usually small corporations that bid on the projects. And so we don't usually see that, because maybe it's because of the scope of the work and the type of the work. So, but we can certainly look into that and make sure that there are protections in the event that you do get that situation where you get that type of a bidder. Because
Well, if you think there's a risk, then we'd want to think about what we need to put into our bidding documents to make it clear. Right.
There's always the ability to investigate the bidders and their qualifications and the individual owners and things like that. So there are those protections already in the bidding documents, that the municipality always reserves the right to do essentially a background investigation. We usually get a lot of the same bidders and companies bidding on road projects and things like that. So it's usually not an issue, but it absolutely could be an issue because there's no preclusion against getting different companies, different types of companies. So, but I can see if there's any room for adding other language.
Well, and that's if you think it's a valid concern. I'm raising it.
Maybe we wait and
Yeah.
see if it comes up again. I
haven't
think
seen-
that's something that's less standard.
Well, but it needs to be done before you send the bidding documents out, I would think. Yeah, right? I mean, if we're not,
Oh, no, yeah. Right. Now, is this specific for,
this
is
contract we've
specific.
already approved, and I'm not challenging,
no,
I'm
you
trying to
mean in
reopen
the
that.
future? Absolutely, for
Yeah,
a
I'm
future
simply-
contract. But there's always, the municipal documents always reserve the right of the municipality to do essentially a full investigation, if it needs to, of the bidder and the veracity of the information in the bid, because there's usually a statement of qualifications and background. And again, if it's a company that the municipality has worked with in the past, they usually don't have to go back and do the same investigation because they already know the company. But if it's a newer company, the engineering department and whoever's responsible for the contract will have that ability. And we always recommend that they go and they ensure that the qualifications and the company itself is what they portray themselves to be, and that you're going to be dealing with them and not these unknown individuals.
Well, this is something that we can ask Mark to keep his eye on, so anytime a bid goes out, just to make sure
But I
that
just wanted to
we're
assure you that it's
protected.
not something that is
I just want to
breezed over
Okay,
when we look at bids.
thank you. All right, the next resolution is 16-226, purchase structural firefighting gear for the Princeton Volunteer Fire Department, Skylands Area Fire Equipment and Training LLC, contract number 80948 for $62,908.86.
I just want to move that, and I just want to say that the question was, there was two prices last time, and this is the actual price, the $62,908.86.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved by Mr.
I'll second that.
Liverman and seconded by Ms. Howard. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes. Next, we come to 16-233, authorizing Princeton's continued participation in the municipal consortium for regional and municipal affordable housing fair share numbers in connection with its declaratory judgment action, additional funding contribution of $2,000. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Miller.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 16-234, bid award for the 2016 striping project in the not-to-exceed amount of $73,110 to Traffic Lines Incorporated. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Howard. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 16-235, bid award for the Snowden Lane Van Dyke Road Extension of Public Sewers Project in the not-to-exceed amount of $692,443 to Integrated Construction and Utilities of New Jersey LLC. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is 16-236, supplemental professional services agreement in the not-to-exceed amount of $9,500 with Aero Geomatics Incorporated for Geographic Information Systems Training Services. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Howard. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 16-237, change order number 1 in the not-to-exceed amount of $14,819 with S. Batata Construction for the 2016 sidewalk contract, resulting in an amended contract amount of $163,009. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Liverman. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Simon. Are there any questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And now we come to our consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by single vote. Are there any items anybody would, I'll ask about that in a second. Is there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Liverman, is there a second?
That's Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller?
Second.
Thank you. Getting dyslexic tonight. Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Simon. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda passes. And I do notice that we have some members of the public who might have come in after we had public comment. So I'd like to just open it back up again now. If there's anything anybody would like to comment on that was not on the agenda, you're welcome to come up. I know it was raining earlier, so it's hard to drive. Yes, your name, you know the drill, your name and address, please.
I'm here to ask for a traffic study for our neighborhood. Back in 2012,
Could you just wait a second, because your mic doesn't seem to be working very well. And maybe start again, just to make sure we have it on tape.
Sure. Lisa Seriosol, 98 Olden Lane in Princeton. I'm here to request a traffic study for our neighborhood. I live at the corner of Olden Lane and Ober Road, but it's actually the entire neighborhood consisting of Olden, Springdale, Battle Road, Hazlitt, Ober, and Newland. We're a residential neighborhood that is experiencing a very heavy amount of commercial traffic, construction traffic, in part as a result of the faculty housing that's being constructed by the Institute for Advanced Study over on Maxwell Lane. And as some of you probably know, there was a planning board meeting where we discussed the problems that we've all been facing and requested the traffic study back then. At that point, Mr. Porter recommended to me that I bring this to council because the planning board and the planning department, I suppose, do not have the budget or the funds for such a study, but that the council could consider it. We are inundated by 80,000-ton trucks, by commercial vehicles, by taxis, by buses, all in a neighborhood that is essentially a cul-de-sac. And whether they obey the speed limit or not obey the speed limit is one issue, but our neighborhood vastly changes between Sunday afternoon and Monday morning, where the bulk of the traffic is an inflow as opposed to people leaving for their commuter activity to get to their jobs. I realize I have 28 seconds, so I'm not sure how much more I can go into detail, but we're looking for your guidance. We're very concerned because the next project is an expansion of the kitchen, and the expansion of the kitchen leads to a $20 million commons area that is supposed to be built at the bottom of Olden Lane, and it will serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the staff and the families of the Institute 7 days a week, and to their guests, and it becomes not a neighborhood anymore. Our peace and tranquility changes vastly when something like this arrives. So I can't tell you how many residents are upset about the traffic and the future possibilities, and we very much request that you consider a traffic study for our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Yeah, I mean, we can definitely ask the traffic committee to take a look at it. I'm a little confused because typically on the planning board, when there's an application, the applicant is required to do a traffic study and pay for it and bring it to the planning board. And I know we've done that with the university often will have to come forward with the traffic study. Avalon Bay had to come forward with the traffic study. And so I completely understand what you're saying, and I hear you, and I understand why you're asking for one. It's just, I think it's unusual for us to fund a traffic study, and I don't know, I don't want to put Ms. Stockton on the spot, but I will. I know she's still getting her sea legs there. I mean, is that something that that we've had a history of doing, or how do the traffic studies normally get done?
Typically, the traffic studies would be done by the land use applicant. They would do a traffic study that would be submitted as part of their application.
Right, so I guess what I would answer to you is that I think we need to do a little bit more internal research about why. I want to have a better understanding of why the Institute wasn't asked to do a traffic study if that's the complaint, and and I don't want to put you in just like getting bounced around, but I feel like we have to get clarity on that. And if for some reason it didn't qualify for a traffic study, then we can have our traffic safety committee take a look and make a recommendation, because typically council would look to the traffic safety committee to make a recommendation to us, and maybe there's other neighborhoods too, when we work it in with something larger and go out for a grant or something to help pay for it. But thank you for bringing it to our attention. And
Just to fill you in, when it was up for review on the faculty housing in 2012, when I attended those meetings and already saw what was going to happen, and unfortunately it did. I asked it back then, and they said, no, there had not been a study, that it wasn't required because it was only 15 units. Well, unfortunately, 15 units is more than doubling the amount of residents on Maxwell Lane itself, not to mention the disruption that has pushed over into our neighborhood. So that was what I was told then. Mr. Porter told me last Thursday, the 14th, sorry, that it was not within his realm to authorize it, so that's why I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I will, why don't we say we're going to refer to the Traffic Safety Committee and then wait to hear back from them as to some recommendations. Thank you.
But I think we also want clarity for the upcoming IAS projects, whether one will be required.
Right. I mean, my sense is that, I mean, I'm sort of putting together what you're saying, but I think if you have, 3 or 4 smaller projects, even if cumulatively they reach some threshold, that the traffic study may never be triggered because each application is looked at separately. And I know this has come up at the planning board before with even different applicants. So you can have a lot of development in one area of town, and each applicant will do the traffic study just on their own particular development, and usually people say that it will reduce traffic. Pretty much all traffic studies come back and say there'll be a reduction in traffic because of this project. But yeah, I think that that's one of the things we struggle with the planning, is that you want to look at that cumulative impact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But thank you. Okay. Is there anybody else who came in late who wanted to speak? And seeing nobody, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. I'll give that this time to Mr. Liverman, seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.